Hey, everybody, and welcome back to episode 40 of the Sunset Single Player Podcast. It's your host, Michael. Today, there's a lot of news I want to go into. We're going to mostly talk about the newly announced Ghost of Tsushima movie today. Also, we do have one PlayStation 5 game that I want to mention that's gone gold. We have a new 60 FPS patch for a past PS4 game to go into. We have two new game delays, two new release windows for upcoming games, and at the very end of the episode, I'll finally give my completed and final thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I did just beat the game this past weekend. With that being said, let's get right into number one of the news this week, which is that Ghost of Tsushima is getting a brand new movie. So we recently found out via a PlayStation blog post by Sucker Punch's very own game director of Ghost of Tsushima, whose name is Nate Fox. And Fox said that the single-player Japanese samurai game will be getting a movie. He also said that the team is excited to bring the story of Jin Sakai to a whole new medium. We learned that Sony Pictures is partnering with Sucker Punch to make this happen, which, of course, if you guys know, isn't surprising at all, considering Sucker Punch is the Seattle-based first-party studio that created Ghost of Tsushima, so they're already owned by Sony in the game capacity, and now they're partnering with Sony Pictures. And of course, Sucker Punch is previously well known for its Sly Cooper and Infamous games, in addition to Ghost of Tsushima most recently. Another interesting part of the announcement is that we learned that Chad Stahelski is directing the movie, and he was the director behind the John Wick set of films, which is interesting. I wouldn't have expected to mix those two together, Ghost of Tsushima with John Wick, but John Wick movies are obviously of a very high quality, and Fox says that he believes the story and the movie are in excellent hands with Chad Stahelski, so it's definitely great to hear there. More than 6.5 million copies of Ghost of Tsushima have been sold worldwide, which is something else we learned in the blog post, and roughly half of the people that have purchased the game have completed the main story, which is really high from a completion perspective. I think the average is much lower than that, probably somewhere in the 20 to 30% completion rate for people that play bigger open world games. It's definitely a longer game, so it really speaks to the quality about the game that players were able to see it to the end for the most part, the majority of them, a little bit over 50%. And finally, Fox did end his post by thanking all of the fans of Ghost of Tsushima. The support of the fans, it's really what made the opportunity for the film arise. So my thoughts on all this. First of all, I do just want to preface this discussion by saying that I believe Ghost of Tsushima is one of the very best games of the PS4 generation. It's right up there with God of War and The Last of Us Part 2 and Red Dead Redemption 2 for me. So before Ghost of Tsushima came out, I was kind of sick of open world games. I thought that besides very high quality games that Rockstar put out, like Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 and Zelda Breath of the Wild is another one that comes to mind, I just thought that the genre just wasn't really for me anymore. I was somewhat of an Assassin's Creed fan as well. AC Valhalla was pretty good. I had a good time with it, but it wasn't really great, and it didn't really do anything that stood out to me in a very positive way. But Ghost of Tsushima, on the other hand, proved me wrong and showed me that open world games can still be really great if they're in the right hands. I just love the beautiful open world of Ghost and the sense of discovery that I felt was missing from so many other open world games in the same type of release window. It just achieved a great success in how you could discover what was in the world. You could discover the fox shrines, the hot springs, and the Mongol hideouts, in addition to just a really solid, beautiful world to look at. I really did just love riding the horse around and seeing what I could discover. I love playing the game thoroughly, and it took me way longer than an average person to beat Ghost of Tsushima since I took on so much of the side content before even beating the main story. I really wanted to clear as much of the map out as I could before continuing on with the main story missions. And I platinumed the game. It probably took me close to 60 hours, I'd say. I played it for like a month or two, just played it most days. I just loved the game so much. The combat was incredible. They nailed the parry system. The ghost weapons were a blast. And the stance system added a completely fun and new gameplay mechanic not seen before in a very simple and elegant way. The maps and the menus were simple and clean. I love the guiding wind mechanic as well. There's just so much detailed work that went into the side quest lines as well, with Sensei Ishikawa, Norio the monk, Yuna, and just a really nice positive set of side characters. Had an amazing soundtrack, but I know this episode isn't about me just gushing about Ghost of Tsushima. You guys are probably wondering how I feel about the actual movie announcement, and I have to say I'm pretty positive about the announcement overall. So at first I definitely was a little bit skeptical about it, but now that I had some time to think about it, I'm definitely all in for this idea, and I have to say it's going to be pretty good, I think. And just the fact that Fox is involved makes me really optimistic about this project. And I'm not saying it's going to be equal to or better than the game, as I think that that would be really hard to accomplish. But what makes me confident is that Stahelski along with Nate Fox just seems like a really high quality combination. And Sucker Punch, as the masterminds behind the game, are heavily involved. I think they're going to have to give their say and approve and give the green light for almost everything that goes into the movie. And I do think that also, since Sucker Punch is so heavily involved, the movie's plot will more or less follow the plot of the main game, which is a very great thing. As a lot of you probably know, I did love the story in Ghost of Tsushima. So I do expect the movie to be very cinematic with the horseback riding sequences, the really brutal and violent katana-based samurai combat, and just the major sense of discovery is the thing that I'm not quite sure they're going to nail in the movie like they did in the game. But I do think that if they can nail the sense of discovery and just the brutality of the katana combat and get the story right, I think we're in for a really nice surprise with this movie. My one worry though is that they won't be able to capture the whole plot in like 2 to 3 hours of runtime, but we'll just have to wait and see, and I'm definitely really excited to check it out once it's ready to go. The movie will also obviously get people interested in playing the game, which is a smart move by Sony. They can even boast that it runs better on PS5 now. It looks great in the performance mode at 60 frames on the PS5, and the resolution mode looks great as well. I was actually playing at my friend's place on the PS5. He's still cleaning up some of the trophies. He likes to do 30 FPS, so the resolution mode when he's riding the horse, just to see the beautiful scenery, flowers, and water effects. Really, really dynamic and impressive in this game. But then when he gets to the combat, he switches it over to the 60 frames performance mode just to make that samurai experience even smoother. So the movie will no doubt serve as a great marketing tool for the game. While there isn't a release window yet, I imagine the Last of Us HBO series will be coming out before the Ghost of Tsushima movie, if I had to guess, just based on the timing of the announcements and everything. And that I'm also looking forward to, in addition to the next, or new I should say, Uncharted movie. I'll definitely have a lot to say about all these TV and movie Sony IP adaptations once we do get to them. So number 2 for the news this week is that Returnal officially has gone gold, and this is a game I covered a lot last week in episode 39. If you guys would like to check it out, the first 10 or 15 minutes of the episode probably focused in on new story details for Returnal. So if you don't know a lot about the story or what's going to go on in Returnal, I recommend you guys check that out. But for those of you that don't know, Returnal is from the Finnish studio Housemarque, who's working in a second-party relationship to Sony. And the upcoming game is a third-person shooter action roguelike game. And Housemarque did tweet on March 25th that the game has gone gold, meaning that the game is substantially completed and it will be soon be ready to be printed to disc. And they of course can fix minor issues and patch the game as it's released. But as it stands now, Returnal is set to come on April 30th, and based on the latest trailers, it's looking really, really good. And I know I mentioned last week, but it's interesting because I thought the combat and the way the game was running didn't look as great in the most recent story trailer, which I still stand by, but I recently went back and watched another Returnal trailer from December of 2020, and I think in that trailer, the gameplay looks really, really impressive. I was very impressed, and I'm not sure why they had the build that they used for the most recent story trailer, but after seeing that December trailer again, I'm really confident in this game. I'm really excited to play it, and I'm going to pre-order it soon as well. I do have a lot of faith in Housemarque, and I am someone who beat and played Resogun, which is their more arcade-style shoot-'em-up game that was released as a launch game on PS4. It's a really excellent game if you guys are looking for something to play until Returnal is ready. And I'm really excited to see what Housemarque can do from a more cinematic, horror-based third-person perspective. I'm really excited to see what they can do. And the fact that it's a third-person shooter roguelike on an alien planet is really cool. There's not a lot of games like that. I think the atmosphere of the planet, which is called Atropos, is looking really scary. The shooting and the movement is looking very kinetic. And like I said last week, the enemy designs look awesome. So again, I don't want to go too much into my thoughts on Returnal. Again, you can listen to episode 39 from last week on YouTube or podcast services if you'd like to hear my thoughts. But I'm very excited to see how this game not only is received critically, I do think it's going to get above an 85 on Metacritic, but I'm also interested to see how it sells because it is $70, which is a point of controversy among a lot of people, but I'm definitely excited to be there day one for this one. I also think Returnal might be something built like Hades, where the game is built on a lot of different runs and has a lot of replay value in that sense, and I imagine the time it'll take to beat the game is going to vary a lot based on skill level for this game. It is said to be pretty challenging, so we'll just have to see there. And I do think that this game is coming at a really good time, April 30th. So far there's only 2 Sony published games on the PS5 at this point that are exclusive to PS5, and that would be Demon's Souls and Astro's Playroom. So it's great that Housemarque is coming in, even though they're not owned by Sony and they are a second party team. It's great that they're coming in to complement what's already available on the system exclusively. So I'm very much looking forward to Returnal on April 30th. Number 3 for the week is the first game delay I do want to report on, which is that Back 4 Blood was delayed to October of 2021. So Back 4 Blood, if you guys haven't heard of it, is the game developed by the California studio called Turtle Rock. It was initially expected for a release in June of 2021, but it has been delayed to October 12th of 2021. So Turtle Rock, which was actually previously known as Valve South, contains some members of the original Valve team that worked on Left 4 Dead and the Left 4 Dead games. So Back 4 Blood is expected to have very similar gameplay and will feature zombie-based co-op type of experiences. So the game is being published by Warner Bros. And not Valve, as Turtle Rock is now actually independent from Valve. So Turtle Rock basically released a statement on Twitter saying that the game just simply needed more time to polish in order to be the best game that it could be, so that they could help to make their fans happy, essentially is what it came down to. And it's good news. So even though this delay is a little bit disappointing for fans of Left 4 Dead that can't wait to jump back into a similar type of co-op zombie shooter, the good news is that an open beta will be happening this summer for players to try. I still do think it was the right call for them to delay the game to make it as good as it can be. And I'm sure that players will definitely give them some solid feedback in the beta. It's great that that'll be available this summer. People can jump in and check it out and give some feedback to Turtle Rock on what improvements they would like to see. So you never know, maybe some of those would even make it to the final game. Number 4 of the news this week is another game delay, and this one is actually a little bit further delayed than the Back 4 Blood news. So the next game is Gotham Knights, and this game is being delayed to 2022. So Gotham Knights, a lot of you guys have probably heard of it, is the upcoming game developed by WB Montreal, who is the same team behind the often glazed over Batman Arkham Origins game. And it has been delayed from 2021 to sometime in 2022. We still don't have a direct date, but I'm sure that will be to come a little bit later. And this was reported on by Engadget.com. So Gotham Knights is set to follow Batgirl, Nightwing, Robin, and Red Hood after Batman's supposed death. So the 4 players will have to join together to stop Gotham from going down a very dark path, and it will be an action RPG where you can level up your character, and it will also support a 2-player co-op mode where a second player can come in and out at any time. Most importantly, it can also be played in single player. So if and when I do get to this title, I'll definitely be playing it solo. And the story as a premise does sound cool to me. I think that taking down villains as Batman's prior allies instead of Batman himself is pretty cool. However, I still would have enjoyed a more single player focused game than one built with co-op as an option. I also would have preferred to play as Batman, just being someone that really loved the original Rocksteady trilogy, especially of Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Knight. And I'd have to say that Arkham Asylum is my favorite out of the 3, but I do have to play City again. I've probably beaten Asylum quite a few times, at least 2 or 3 times, but I need to replay City. And in terms of Batman Arkham Origins, I sadly have never played that game. That is the one that just a lot of people haven't really played because it's not developed by Rocksteady, the same great studio that made the 3 more well-known titles, Asylum, City, and Night, although Origins did come out in 13, so Origins actually came out between City and Night. And I'm sure I would have liked Origins as well. I just don't think I can play it on PS4, PS5, besides through like streaming on PlayStation Now, which is just not ideal. I definitely would have really liked a remaster for it and would have played it, because the Rocksteady games were actually all remastered for PlayStation 4 as well and are backwards compatible on PS5. WB is a publisher also with Avalanche Software, recently delayed Hogwarts Legacy to 2022. So I think it's cool that WB as a publisher is giving these teams in Avalanche for Hogwarts and WB Montreal for Gotham Knights just more time to polish their games. I really do always like to see this. I really don't like seeing situations where publishers want to rush developers and rush the game out to meet any type of time constraint. I do think that most of the time, the longer a game is in development, with more polish, the better the final product would be. And it should also be noted that Rocksteady's upcoming game, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, is also set to come out in 2022 as well. So whereas Gotham Knights by WB Montreal is going to be more of an action RPG, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will be an action-adventure shooter featuring up to 4-player co-op, so not 2-player co-op like Gotham Knights, and will also have the ability to be played by yourself as well. And Suicide Squad will be set in an open world metropolis, which actually makes me think of the description for Cyberpunk 2077, the open world metropolis. And the 4 playable characters in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League will be Harley Quinn, Boomerang, Deadshot, and Killshark. So I really hope they space these games out and don't stack them one right on top of the other. Hopefully we get one in like March of 2022 and the other in fall of 2022. And it is important to note here that both WB Montreal and Rocksteady have been working on these games for a really long time. They've been in development for a while now. So Arkham Origins was released in 2013, like I said, and then Rocksteady released Arkham Knight in 2015 that had the really sweet Batmobile sections that some people hated for some reason, but I actually really liked. So while WB Montreal did assist Rocksteady in the development of some Batman Arkham Knight DLC that was released in 2015, both studios by 2022 will not have released anything for 7 years. So there's definitely a lot riding on these two games, I think. I'm excited to see more of both of them. I am a little bit cautiously optimistic. I really would have just preferred another game similar to the first set of Arkham games where you play as Batman. Those games are just so good. And that isn't to say I disagree with them trying something new, both of these studios with these two games. I do think it's good that they're trying something new with new characters and new type of gameplay, and even throwing co-op into the mix. I definitely think it has potential to be good, both of them. But the dark atmosphere and stealth action melee-based gameplay of the prior Arkham games in single-player type of setting just appeals to me more personally, but I'll definitely keep my eye on both Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League once they're ready to go in 2022, is what it's sounding like. Number 5 is that a new game was announced, and it's coming in July to PS4 and PS5. So this game is called Hoa, and Hoa is a new hand-painted puzzle platformer coming, and the game is developed by PM Studios, a Los Angeles team. So PM was founded in 2008 and is led by the CEO, Michael Yum. And they've released various indie games so far, like Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, Bladed Fury, and Ever Forward. I haven't played any of those 3 games. Hoa is said to feature hand-painted art and amazing music as you explore the environment and solve puzzles. And it turned into a serious project for the team in 2019. We learned through a PlayStation blog post. And it seems to have a large emphasis on flora, fauna, and fairies as well. It's supposed to be mysterious and emotional, according to the article. And the PS5 version of the game does come with some extra bells and whistles. It will feature adaptive triggers in the sense of flying, and the longer that you're in the air, the harder the triggers will be to pull. The haptic feedback will also be felt, and grass and tree movement will be heard through the DualSense's new controller speaker. So to me, if you guys want, on YouTube, there's about a 7 or 8 minute walkthrough, I think, or maybe 8 to 12. I can't remember the exact time. But they just show a little bit of gameplay of Hoa, and to me it looks a lot like Ori, but with a greater focus on exploration and puzzle solving than combat, at least so far. That's definitely subject to change. Maybe there will be combat that we just haven't seen yet. And as someone who loved Ori and likes to try beautiful looking indie titles and really likes the puzzle platformer genre as well, I think I'll definitely be giving Hoa a try on PS5 in July once it's ready to go. So 2 more news items of the week. Number 6 is that Pray for the Gods is estimated for a release in the second half of April. So website the6thAxis.com reports that the upcoming Shadow of the Colossus spiritual successor game, Pray for the Gods, which was initially anticipated in the first quarter of 2021, is now aiming for a second half of April release date. So a representative from No Matter Studios, which is the Seattle-based developer, stated, quote, "Actually, we could have shipped the game in March, but we figured it was best to polish the game rather than release a build right off the presses. I put our estimate in the mid to late April window, still an estimate. We're through certification on PS4, PS5, and Xbox. It's now just a matter of polish, getting a launch trailer prepped, and the final versions ready for a global launch." And it's also reported in the article that the game will run at 30 FPS on PS4 and 60 FPS on PS5 with improved graphics and textures as well. And there will be a free upgrade for PS4 players to PS5, although we're not sure yet if there will be save transfer capability as well. PS5 version of the game will also use the perks of the new DualSense controller, like adaptive triggers and tension from a bowstring point of view, and the feeling of snow crunching under the playable character's feet from a haptic feedback perspective. The team is also still looking into additional ways the PS5 controller can be supported in the game, so I'd imagine those will be some final touches that they'll add a little bit later on. And I do think that the game looks really cool. I'm someone that really enjoyed the Shadow of the Colossus remake. I never played the original, but I thought Bluepoint did an excellent job with the remake. It's very lonely gameplay in Shadow of the Colossus with some really memorable boss fights that I hope No Matter Studios can add their own twist to and replicate, while also being new and creative in a really interesting way. That definitely remains to be seen. Shadow of the Colossus was mostly based in a green grass and summer landscape, whereas Pray for the Gods seems to be mostly contained in the snow and the ice and more of a winter landscape in the mountains, which should definitely be a nice change of pace from the sunnier fields of Shadow. And it does also seem to have a greater emphasis on combat than Shadow of the Colossus did as well. So there's obviously still a major focus in this game in climbing on top of and taking down Colossus-looking beasts, and I'm sure that the Colossus designs will be new and fresh. I doubt they're going to completely copy any of the designs of the first game. So the major question to me that remains is whether or not No Matter Studios in Pray for the Gods can nail the gameplay and the feeling of actually playing the game. So while Shadow of the Colossus was amazing from an atmosphere and a loneliness and a graphical perspective, the remake at least, I did think that the gameplay was still a bit antiquated, even with the remake in mind. So I definitely like something with more modern controls, maybe a little bit more action with the bow and the arrow, something that's just easier to grasp and pick up and play for new players, something with just a more modern type of control scheme. So we'll definitely just have to wait and see how the game plays. I, for one, am really excited to check it out as a big fan of Shadow of the Colossus when Pray for the Gods presumably comes to PS4 and PS5 in the second half of April. All right, number 7 of the news this week, and this is just a really quick one. We don't have final details on a date for this, but after this last one, I'll get into my final thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake, like I said, which I did just beat. So number 7 of the news this week is that Ratchet & Clank, the Insomniac game from 2016, which I love personally, was announced to be getting a new free 60 FPS PS5 patch coming in April sometime. And this is awesome to me because now from an Insomniac perspective, we have Ratchet & Clank 2016, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, the first Spider-Man and all DLC, and Miles Morales all playable at 60 frames on PS5, and these are some of my very favorite games. Insomniac is probably in my top 3 developers of all time. I loved Ratchet & Clank back in the day. The Spider-Man games are phenomenal. I like them even better than the Batman Arkham games from a superhero perspective. So I think this is great. Sometime in April, if you guys haven't played Ratchet & Clank from 2016 yet and have a PS5, you can play it at 60 frames and get ready for Rift Apart. I'll probably be jumping back in and doing New Game Plus on this one. All right, so to wrap up the episode this week, like I said, I do just want to give my final thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Remake, and most of my discussion of this game did come in episodes 38 and 39, because it was a longer game to beat. I played it over the course of about 3 weeks, I would say. I think I started it on like March 8th or 9th or something, and I recently wrapped it up at the end of the month, so really solid game for PS Plus this month. Longer game, a lot of content there, very high quality experience as well. And I know, like I said, I have gone into this game already, but I do just want to give my quick final verdict on it. The best parts about Final Fantasy VII Remake to me lie in the gameplay and the musical score. I love the battles in this game from an action kind of turn-based perspective, as just incredible music blasts overhead. Some of the music even contained near the end of the game that I noticed some really crazy guitar solos that I wasn't expecting. I didn't know the soundtrack would just completely rock out like that. At first, it was kind of a beautiful, more mellow orchestral soundtrack with definitely moments of intensity contained in it as well, but the guitar work definitely blew me away near the end of the game, and just some really high quality action set piece moments. The abilities and the magical powers contained in each separate character were really impactful, and I love being able to adjust materia and switch characters on the fly in the midst of battle. Tifa was always my ice materia character, Barret I used for ranged electrical materia attacks, and then Cloud was always my fire materia. And Aerith is a character, she was always my healer of the party. I could always count on her to heal everybody up. The enemy designs in the game were so detailed and unique. I've never seen some of these enemies before. I love the art style of some of these enemies that you took on. I love fighting the wyvern dragons, and some of the bosses in the game were just also so difficult. Final Fantasy VII Remake was definitely challenging at times, even on normal difficulty, and you really had to understand not only how to switch back and forth between characters, but you also had to understand how to assess enemy weaknesses, how to upgrade certain magical attack power and regular attack power. Some of the story moments were really exciting and suspenseful as well, but overall, my main thoughts after beating the game is that while this was a very good video game, I definitely didn't understand the story completely. And a lot of that is my own fault, considering I've never played the original game. So I did consider playing the original, but it came out in 1997, and it's just such a long game. And I'd rather play more modern games at this time and take some time to read about the original story of Final Fantasy VII later. So there's no doubt I definitely would have gotten more out of the story and the experience had I played the original, but from an outside type of perspective, I'm still someone that really enjoyed the game regardless. I also thought that in addition to a convoluted story, especially near the end, the ending itself wasn't very impactful besides a few cool moments leading up to the end. Some of the puzzles and the more linear sections walking through Midgar could have been removed completely in my opinion. It was really just padding that lengthened the game time in a negative way. And at times the game was very drawn out and checkpoints could be rough as well occasionally, especially near the end of the game. Some of the fights made you go back to a previous fight to make it ahead, but then other ones were good. They did give you the option of just going to the fight you just died in rather than making you play a few in a row, but still not great. And I thought overall that the Avalanche party was likable, and even Barrett grew on me a little bit by the end of the game, and he did give a really epic speech to Shinra themselves near the end. And while intense and brash, his heart was definitely in the right place, so he definitely did grow on me throughout my time in the game. And Cloud did as well. Cloud definitely redeemed himself as a protagonist to me, and he's by far my favorite character in the game by the end. I thought from kind of an enemy standpoint, Shinra as a corporation had some really great antagonists that you hated. And again, some of the Shinra bosses were incredible. Playing as Cloud, you really did hate them and want to take them down. It definitely added to the experience. And overall, the game just had some really incredible moments that blew me away and made me happy I played the game to completion. The great gameplay and music made me happy I enjoyed it to the end as well. So while I loved the action, turn-based gameplay, the visuals and the music, the confusing nature of the story, and certain repetitive moments near the end of the game and towards the middle as well that drew it out, definitely bring it down a little bit for me. If I had to rate it out of 10, I think I would give it an 8.5. Some moments of the game were masterful. Like I mentioned last week, the Eligor boss fight blew me away, and one of the fights near the end of the game blew me away as well that I don't want to spoil. But some moments in the game were just way below this and definitely not deserving of a 10 out of 10. Just little moments that brought down the game. And I should also mention that some of the assets, like the art assets, didn't look updated and were very outdated. They didn't put in the time to fix them up completely. So it just didn't really deliver that consistent high level of quality throughout the entire experience. However, there were moments of genius throughout it, and I'm really glad I played it. I'm excited to play the second part when it's ready to go, and I might skip the Yuffie DLC. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to get the PS5 version and play through that maybe a little bit later on as a sale. So that's going to do it for episode 40 this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I do want to give you a heads up. So coming up in April for what you guys can expect coverage-wise for the podcast, I am planning on playing Oddworld Soulstorm on PS5, hopefully Blue Fire. I'm waiting for the PS5 release date. So Blue Fire is a 3D action platformer game that I've mentioned in the past. I'm really excited to jump into that one by Roby Studios. And then finally, Pray for Gods is in the second part of the month. All these three should be shorter games. So Oddworld is probably going to be under 10 hours. Blue Fire, I read, is like 15. And then Pray for the Gods is going to be under 10 as well. And then on April 30th, we have Returnal as well, which I'm really excited to play and cover for the show. And I'll probably even put up a video review of that one. Really excited to play Returnal and cover that one for you guys. And I also did pre-order Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on Amazon. Really ready for that one too in June. But that's it for this week, guys. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed it. And please look forward to episode 41 next week of the Sunset Single Player Podcast. Thanks and take care.